Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Doug McBride, once a respected cardiothoracic surgeon, is now a man under siege by the system, by his own impulses, and worst of all, by himself. The pressure mounts from all sides, at the hospital, where colleagues whisper about his deteriorating surgical precision, and at home, where the tension in his marriage with Vanessa grows more brittle by the day. Ted Richardson, the hospital's chief of staff and Doug's longtime mentor, finally confronts him in a private meeting. The conversation begins diplomatically, but quickly sharpens when Ted alludes to a mistake in Doug's past. It's not just one. It's a chain of errors fueled by Doug's growing addiction to high-stakes gambling, an addiction that has eroded his confidence and shattered the muscle memory in his once gifted hands. The climax came during a complex mitral valve replacement, where a minor but critical miscalculation nearly killed the patient. Only the swift intervention of his surgical partner saved the man. Doug tries to defend himself, claiming exhaustion and temporary burnout, but Ted isn't buying it. He tells Doug, in no uncertain terms, that another slip-up will cost him his license. It's a way-up career it should be. Back at home, Doug's spiral continues. He finds it easier to drown in poker nights and secret online gambling accounts than to face his wife, Vanessa. Their once passionate relationship now feels like a contractual obligation, filled with short exchanges, fake smiles, and late nights spent apart. But it isn't just the emotional distance that bothers Doug, it's the money. Doug has accumulated massive gambling debt, and with no way to explain his dwindling finances to Vanessa, he starts snooping around her accounts. That's when he notices something odd. Her financials have surged. Large deposits, wire transfers, unexplained credits. He confronts her subtly at first, making light of the bank statements, but Vanessa brushes him off with vague answers about investment returns and family money. Doug isn't convinced. As Doug's paranoia escalates, he begins to suspect that Vanessa may be involved in something illegal. The sudden influx of cash, her evasiveness, and her growing independence all point to one thing: she's hiding something. And given the current state of their marriage, he fears it's something that could destroy them both. The real breaking point comes when Ted's words echo in Doug's mind one night after a failed poker game where he loses $25,000. Standing in their kitchen at 2 a.m., he pours himself a drink and stares at Vanessa's purse on the counter. A man like Doug, who once cut through the intricacies of the human heart with elegance, now fumbles through the lining of his wife's handbag for a clue to her secrets. Inside, he finds a key to a safety deposit box and a burner phone. The call logs on the phone show frequent communication with a contact labeled only as R. Doug puts 2 and 2 together and dials an old number he hasn't called in years. On the other end is Randy Parkera, known associate of Joey, a local crime boss with deep ties in underground finance and medical black markets. Randy sounds surprised, but intrigued. Doug arranges a meeting. At an abandoned parking garage late the next evening, Doug lays his cards on the table. He doesn't tell Randy everything but offers enough: debts, danger, a wife who might be laundering money. He proposes a deal: information in exchange for help. Doug needs money to pay off his bookies, and more importantly, he wants leverage. If Vanessa is involved with Joey's network, Doug wants in. Randy listens silently, then laughs. "You always were a desperate genius," he says. But whether Randy is amused or seriously considering Doug's offer is unclear. Doug can't tell if he's walked into a negotiation or a trap. Meanwhile, Vanessa begins to notice a change in Doug. He becomes unpredictable. Overly attentive one moment, cold the next. He asks too many questions about her work, her day, her finances. She senses his suspicion and, in turn, begins to pull away. But Vanessa has secrets of her own. Years ago, before marrying Doug, she had been involved with a private investor, a smooth-talking venture capitalist who later turned out to be a front for Joey's laundering operation. She thought she had walked away clean. But shortly after Doug's gambling habit spun out of control, she received a visit from one of Joey's men. They offered her a chance to make smart returns through silent partnerships and foreign accounts. At first, she resisted. But then the medical bills, the mortgages, and Doug's mysterious late-night absences added up. She rationalized her decision. Just one deal. Then another. And another. When Doug discovers her involvement, he's both enraged and strangely relieved. He finally understands where the money came from, but now he's in deeper trouble. Not only is he compromised, but he's tethered to Vanessa's sins as tightly as he is to his own. Randy finally returns Doug's call and agrees to a second meeting. This time, the tone is different. Randy speaks in riddles, clearly enjoying the power dynamic. He tells Doug that Joey is suspicious of Vanessa and might be planning to cut her loose permanently. Doug panics. Despite everything, he doesn't want Vanessa hurt. Randy offers Doug a chance to fix everything. You help us get what we need from her account access, transaction trails, confirmation of her involvement, and Joey will let you both walk away. Clean. No debts. Doug is torn. Betray Vanessa to save her? Or protect her and risk both their lives? He agrees to consider it. That night, Doug sneaks into Vanessa's office at home and copies files from her laptop onto a flash drive. But what he finds shocks him: detailed records of not just her transactions, but Doug's. Vanessa has been tracking his gambling, his debts, even his meeting with Randy. She knew. She always knew. Before he can process it, he hears footsteps. Vanessa stands in the doorway, staring at him. Looking for something, doctor? Her voice is steady, cold. For the first time, Doug realizes she's not the victim he thought she was. She may even be more dangerous than he is. What follows is a tense confrontation that stops just short of violence. Words are exchanged. Accusations. Apologies. But no resolution. Both realize they are trapped in a web neither fully understands. Doug returns to Randy and tells him he needs more time. Randy nods, but his patience is clearly running thin. Time, he says, is the one thing you don't have. Doug's phone rings the next morning. It's Ted. The board wants to meet. Today. It's about the patient from the mitral valve case. There are questions. And someone's made an anonymous complaint. Doug knows what this means. His career is about to implode. And so, he makes a choice. He meets Randy that night with a flash drive. This has everything you need, Doug says. Let her go. Let us both go. Randy takes the drive. Smiles. We'll see. But Doug isn't sure what he's just done. He walks away from the meeting not with relief, but dread. Because in a world built on secrets and leverage, the truth is never the end. It's just the beginning. Doug McBride sat in his car outside the hospital parking lot long after the board meeting had adjourned. The room had been cold, judgmental. His defense was calculated, clinical, but ultimately hollow. Ted Richardson hadn't spoken much, just watched him with a resigned kind of disappointment. The board didn't fire him. Not yet. But he was placed on indefinite leave pending further investigation. That left Doug suspended in a professional purgatory, his license intact, but his career dangling by a thread. The weight of what he had done both in the OR and with Randy Parker pressed on his chest like a concrete block. He had betrayed the very principles he once swore to uphold. And worse, he had betrayed his wife. At home, Vanessa McBride no longer pretended. The confrontation had shattered whatever was left of their marital charade. She packed her things quietly, efficiently. Doug watched her from the threshold of their bedroom doorway, unsure whether to stop her or help her zip the suitcase. When she finally turned to him, there was no anger in her eyes. Just finality. You think you know what you've done, she said softly. But you don't. Not yet. And then she was gone. Doug didn't know where she went, but he suspected she wouldn't be gone for long. Especially not with the kind of information she carried on him, on herself, and perhaps on Joey's network. Meanwhile, Randy Parker wasn't returning Doug's calls. For 2 days, Doug lived in a state of limbo, wondering if the flash drive he handed over had bought him freedom or painted a target on his back. The silence from Joey's end was more terrifying than any threat. But it was also telling. Something was brewing. That something arrived on a rainy Thursday morning when Doug received a call from a blocked number. The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "You'll be receiving a visitor today. Be home. Don't call anyone." The line went dead. Doug waited, heart racing. Hours passed. At 6:17 p.m., a knock. He opened the door to find Vanessa. Only, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Elon Hawthornia, respected attorney known for taking on high-profile, high-risk cases. Elon greeted Doug with a faint nod. "You're in more danger than you realize," Elon said as they entered the house. Vanessa dropped a leather folder on the table. Inside were documents detailing multiple shell corporations tied back to Joey's laundering ring. Several transactions pointed directly to Doug's gambling payments. Others implicated Vanessa. But what struck Doug most was a third set of transfers from an account tied to Randy Parker, leading to what looked like political campaign contributions. "Randy's not just Joey's muscle," Elon said. "He's his fixer. And someone in this town is helping keep the heat off. That someone wants you out of the way." Doug reeled. "So what now?" "Now," Vanessa said, her voice steely, "we go on the offensive." Vanessa had spent the last few days contacting a trusted investigative journalist, someone willing to expose the network publicly. But they needed more. Proof. Names. Timelines. Doug's flash drive wasn't enough. What they needed was live surveillance. Access. They needed Randy. That meant bait. Elon laid out the plan. Doug would reach out again under the guise of a deal gone wrong. He would feign panic, say he had more data he never shared. Something Joey wouldn't want exposed. It would be risky. But it might draw Randy out long enough to get what they needed. The plan was set. Doug made the call. "I gave you a sample. But there's more. Files that connect people Joey doesn't even know he's vulnerable to. I want out completely. I want protection. You give me that, and you get everything." Randy's reply was short. "Where?" They arranged to meet in the empty boiler room of an abandoned Hotel Joey classic. Elon, wired and watching from a surveillance van. Vanessa, nearby with her burner phone, ready to call law enforcement if things went south. Randy showed up exactly on time, alone but confident. Doug tried to play the role, scared, jittery, but just believable enough. He handed over a fake hard drive. Randy checked it briefly, nodding. "That's it. It's enough to bury him. And you. If I disappear, copies go to the press." Randy gave a sharp smile. "You were always smarter than you looked." Doug started to walk away. "One more thing," Randy said. "Joey wants to meet. Tonight." Doug froze. This wasn't part of the plan. "Why?" "You're either a liability or an asset. He wants to see for himself." Doug hesitated. Then nodded. "Where?" Randy gave him the location, a private lounge downtown. Doug relayed it to Elon through the mic, trying not to visibly shake. That evening, Doug entered the lounge alone. Joey sat in a velvet booth, sipping whiskey. The man was older, lean, with eyes like a scalpel. Randy stood nearby, arms folded. Joey waved Doug in. "You've been making noise. That concerns me." Doug sat. "I want out." "I brought you what you needed." "Not yet," Joey said. "But soon. You'll do one last thing for me. And then you're free." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a name, Ted Richardson. Doug's blood ran cold. "He's asking questions. Too many. We need leverage." Doug shook his head. "He's clean." "No one's clean. You work with him. Find something. Or you're not walking out of this." Doug left the lounge feeling like a ghost. Back with Vanessa and Elon, he recounted everything. The name. The threat. The impossible task. "We flip it," Elon said. "We use Joey's demand to trap him." They decided to fake a scandal involving Tada, fabricated trail of offshore investments connected to a false ID. They'd make Joey believe Doug had succeeded, all while documenting Joey's direct involvement in targeting a hospital administrator. The pieces fell into place. 2 days later, Joey sent confirmation. The operation had been approved. Doug would get paid. A clean break. The sting went live that night. Law enforcement raided Joey's properties. Arrests were made. Randy tried to run. He didn't get far. Vanessa's name surfaced, but the depth of her cooperation earned her immunity. Doug, though not entirely cleared, was allowed to keep his license under strict supervision. Ted, once told of Doug's actions, offered a quiet handshake and a single word: redemption. Weeks later, Doug and Vanessa met at a bench overlooking the city. "So what now?" he asked. "Now we find out if we can build something without lies," she said. Doug nodded. Neither knew if that was possible. But for the first time in a long time, they were willing to try. 6 months had passed since the takedown of Joey's network. Genoa City had quietly returned to its surface calm, but those who had been closest to the fire were still feeling the aftershocks. Doug McBride, now back in limited surgical rotation, moved through the hospital halls with a humility that hadn't existed before. Every scalpel he picked up felt heavier, every decision slower, more deliberate. The medical board had allowed his return under close watch, with the stipulation that he attend therapy, undergo monthly performance reviews, and have a second surgeon present during all high-risk procedures. He didn't complain. Vanessa McBride, though legally cleared, remained a figure of fascination and suspicion in certain circles. She had stepped away from public appearances and business events, opting instead for a quieter life. She joined a financial ethics nonprofit as an anonymous advisor and spent most of her days in a small studio outside the city painting a hobby she hadn't touched in over a decade. They had decided not to divorce. Not yet. They weren't living together either. Once a week, they met at the same bench overlooking the skyline, talking, listening, sometimes just sitting. It wasn't reconciliation. It was reconstruction. Ted Richardson remained at the hospital, though rumors suggested he had submitted early retirement paperwork. The stress of the Joey scandal and his near involvement had aged him visibly. He hadn't confronted Doug beyond that one handshake, but his presence loomed quietly in every boardroom, in every decision. For now, he kept the system running. Randy Parker had flipped. Facing decades in prison and fearing Joey's wrath from behind bars, he chose to become a federal witness. His testimony unraveled even deeper corruption than expected, exposing medical supply fraud, fake billing, and ties between Joey's men and city officials. The trial was scheduled for early next year. Doug and Vanessa would both be subpoenaed. Joey himself had vanished. After the raids, he slipped through the cracks. Authorities suspected he had fled the country, likely aided by a network that extended far beyond Genoa City. Interpol issued a red notice. Nothing came back. Until one afternoon in December, when Doug received an unmarked envelope in his hospital mailbox. Inside was a single photo, a blurry shot of Doug and Vanessa at their weekly bench. On the back, written in bold red ink, "You think it's over." Doug took the photo straight to Elon Hawthorne, who was now representing multiple whistleblowers tied to the Joey investigation. Elon looked at the photo, jaw tightening. "He's not gone," Elon said. "He's regrouping. Watching. Should we go public?" "No. Not yet. Let him believe we're scared. That we're standing still." Doug returned home that night, his heart pounding. Vanessa wasn't there. He paced for hours. When she finally texted, she simply said, "I saw it too. Let's not let him win." They met the next day and agreed on one thing: they would be proactive. Elon connected them with a federal protection liaison. Extra precautions were taken. Digital tracking, secure communications, and surveillance on their weekly meetings. They weren't just victims now. They were key players in a broader investigation still unfolding. But something else had shifted. In the quiet spaces between threat assessments and closed-door meetings, Doug and Vanessa began talking differently. Less guarded. More honest. About the past. About why they had become strangers. Doug confessed things he'd buried. About the pressure of perfection. The fear of failure. The rush he got from gambling that surgery no longer gave him. Vanessa revealed the loneliness she'd felt long before the money came. The burden of always playing the supportive wife when she longed to run her own empire. They didn't say, "I forgive you." That wasn't the goal. But they said, "I see you." And sometimes, that was more powerful. In January, Doug was asked to give a lecture at the medical university. The topic was resilience after failure. He almost declined. But Vanessa encouraged him to go. So he stood before a packed lecture hall of students and peers and told them the truth. Not the sanitized version. The real one. The addiction. The mistake. The cover-up. The fear. He ended with this. Your license gives you the right to cut into another human being. But it's your humility that gives you the right to try again. The room was silent. Then came the applause. Not loud, but real. Afterward, as Doug stepped outside into the winter air, Vanessa was waiting. She didn't speak. She just took his hand. Together, they walked into the snow.